It was a bitterly cold February night when Lisa Holloway received the gift. The kind of night that made every gust of wind feel like a slap in the face, and every creak of the old house sounded like the whispers of things long forgotten. Lisa had just moved into the small town of Ravencroft, a place known for its steep hills, dense forests, and odd, lingering whispers of strange occurrences. It was the sort of town that people spoke about in hushed tones, where every history book seemed to have missing pages. And Valentine's Day in Ravencroft? Well, that was another story altogether. Lisa wasn't one for the romantic trappings of the holiday. She had always found it a little too cheesy, a little too forced. But this year felt different. After a long, lonely year of moving from one city to the next, she was hopeful that Ravencroft would be the fresh start she needed. The town, with its charming streets and picturesque cottages, seemed like the perfect place to finally settle down. The knock on the door came at dusk. Lisa was curled up on the couch with a mug of hot tea, glancing through a magazine. She wasn't expecting anyone, no family, no friends. And certainly no Valentine's Day visitors. When she opened the door, there was no one in sight. At first, she thought she'd imagined the knock, but then, right on her doorstep, was a package. It was small, wrapped in crimson red paper, with a thin black ribbon tied around it. The kind of ribbon that looked too neat, too perfect, to have been done by anyone but a professional. There was no return address, no name, just a tiny note attached to the package. The note read, "For your heart, with love, from someone who knows." Her first thought was that it was some kind of mistake. But curiosity got the better of her, and she carefully untied the ribbon. The moment the wrapping fell away, a chill swept through the air. The box was made of dark wood, smooth to the touch, with intricate carvings along its edges, carvings that seemed to shift, like shadows moving in the corners of her eyes. She placed the box on the table, but a strange unease settled over her. Something about it felt wrong. Lisa tried to shake it off. After all, it was Valentine's Day. She hadn't received any gifts in years, and perhaps someone had decided to be kind. But as her fingers brushed against the lid of the box, her heart skipped a beat. The wood was cold. Too cold. Her instincts screamed at her to leave the box alone, but she pushed the thought away. With trembling hands, she opened the lid. Inside, nestled in soft black velvet, was a delicate heart-shaped locket. Its design was simple but elegant, the edges finely crafted with a swirl of silver, like a vine winding its way through the metal. But as she reached for it, a cold gust of wind blew through the house, despite the windows being closed. The locket seemed to pulse in her hand, as though it had a heartbeat of its own. Lisa frowned, wondering what kind of prank this was. The locket, although beautiful, felt wrong. It felt like it was waiting for something. She hesitated before closing the box and setting it aside. There was a growing tension in her chest, an itch in her mind that told her to ignore the locket, to leave it where it was. But she couldn't. The night passed uneventfully, but sleep eluded her. She tossed and turned in bed, her mind replaying the strange gift. Her gut told her something was off, but she pushed the feeling away. The town was old. It was bound to have its strange moments. The next morning, however, things took an unexpected turn. Lisa was walking down Main Street when she passed by a small, dilapidated shop that she hadn't noticed before. It was tucked in the corner of an alley, obscured by a row of old oak trees. The sign above the door read, "Madame Fortuna's Curiosities." Despite the shop's uninviting appearance, there was something about it that drew her in, something she couldn't explain. She pushed open the door, the bell above it chiming softly as she stepped inside. The air was thick with the scent of incense and old books. Shelves upon shelves were crammed with odd trinkets, strange stones, faded portraits, and old, tattered scrolls. But it was the woman behind the counter that caught Lisa's attention. She was elderly, with silver hair that cascaded down her back in loose waves. Her eyes were sharp, piercing, and she studied Lisa with an intensity that made Lisa feel as if she were being read like a book. "Welcome, dear," the woman said, her voice low and gravelly. "I see you've come seeking answers." Lisa hesitated. I I didn't know I was seeking anything. The woman's lips curled into a knowing smile. It's the way of things here. You find what you don't know you need. Lisa felt a chill crawl up her spine. What do you mean? The woman gestured to the various objects on the shelves. People come to me for many things, but it's the heart that calls the loudest. You can feel it, can't you? The weight in your chest, the thing that keeps you awake at night. Lisa's breath caught in her throat. She didn't know how this woman could have possibly known how she'd been feeling, but it was as if the woman could see right into her soul. That box, Madame Fortuna continued, pointing to the front of the store where Lisa noticed an open box containing old trinkets. It's tied to the past. And the past has a way of reaching into the future. You don't understand it yet, but you will. Lisa frowned. What do you mean? Madame Fortuna's gaze never wavered. I can see it in your eyes, child. The locket. It's not just a trinket. It's a key. A key to something that should not be opened. But you will open it. A wave of panic surged through Lisa. How could this woman know about the locket? Had someone told her? She looked down at the counter, her hands suddenly clammy. What will happen if I open it? The woman's expression softened. What happens when we open doors we shouldn't? The locket has a story. And it is not a happy one. Lisa's heart pounded in her chest. Something dark stirred within her, a memory that refused to be named. The door had been opened, and she hadn't even realized it. The woman's voice dropped to a whisper. It's tied to the death of a woman who loved too deeply. A love so strong it consumed her. She never left, you know. She waits. And the locket calls her. It always has. You are just the one who answered. Lisa stood frozen, the weight of the words sinking into her like a heavy stone. Tell me, Lisa whispered, her voice trembling. What happens if I open it? Madame Fortuna's smile was slow, almost sad. It will open more than you expect, my dear. It will open the door that binds her, and release what's been trapped for too long. Lisa could feel the tension building in her chest, her breath quickening as she turned to leave. She wasn't sure what had just happened, but she was sure of one thing: she had stepped into something much bigger than herself. And that Valentine's Day gift? The locket? It was only the beginning. The days following the encounter with Madame Fortuna felt like they slipped through Lisa's fingers, like sand in the wind. No matter how hard she tried to focus on her work, or immerse herself in the mundane routines of daily life, her mind kept returning to that conversation. The locket, the warning, the sense that something dark had been unleashed with her acceptance of that mysterious Valentine's Day gift. She couldn't shake the feeling that the woman at the shop knew something Lisa didn't understand yet. It will open more than you expect, Madame Fortuna had said. It will open the door that binds her. But who was she talking about? Who was this woman from the past whose love had bound her to a locket, to a mystery, to the town of Ravencroft? Lisa stared at the locket, now sitting on her kitchen table. She hadn't dared touch it since Madame Fortuna's warning, but it seemed to pulse with a quiet energy, almost as if it were alive, waiting. Its intricate swirls glinted under the low light, drawing her in with a strange, magnetic pull. She had tried to leave it alone, but the pull grew stronger with each passing day. It was the third night since her visit to the shop when Lisa finally made her decision. The house was eerily quiet, the wind howling outside as snow began to drift down in thick flurries. It was the perfect night for unraveling mysteries, for confronting what lay hidden in the shadows. She couldn't run from it anymore. Her fingers shook as she reached for the locket. The moment she touched it, the temperature in the room seemed to drop, a chill creeping up her spine. The locket was cold, colder than it should have been, and it felt heavier than it had before, as if it had absorbed something in the hours since she last held it. With a deep breath, she unclasped the locket. A soft click echoed in the quiet room, almost too loud in the stillness. Lisa hesitated, her pulse pounding in her ears. She opened it. Inside was a faded photograph, yellowed with age, and beneath it, something that made her blood run cold. A slip of paper, handwritten in elegant, looping script, caught her eye. She slowly pulled the paper free, her hands trembling. It read, "To my love, my eternal one. Though death may part us, you will forever live in my heart. And as I fall into the darkness, know that I shall always return." Lisa's throat tightened as she read the words. They were romantic, but there was an unmistakable sadness to them, as if the writer knew something tragic was coming, something unavoidable. The paper was fragile, as if it had been handled too many times. She turned the photograph over, expecting to see nothing more than a generic picture of a man and woman in love. But instead, her heart skipped a beat. The woman in the photo was her. Her face, her eyes, stared back at her, hauntingly familiar. Lisa's breath hitched in her chest. She stared at the image, trying to make sense of it. It couldn't be her. This photo was old, worn with time, yet there she was, staring out from the past, a woman she had never seen before, but who somehow mirrored her own features perfectly. The air around her grew thick, the edges of the room seeming to distort, bend like the pages of a forgotten book. And then it hit her, the locket wasn't just a gift. It wasn't a mere trinket. It was a link to the past, to someone long gone. But why had it called to her? Why had it found its way to her doorstep? As Lisa pondered this, a soft whisper brushed against her ear. It was a voice, faint, far off, but unmistakable. "I waited for you. I waited for so long." Lisa spun around, her eyes wide, but there was no one there. The house was still. Too still. But that voice, it was real. She had heard it. It was as if the air itself was speaking, the walls closing in, suffocating her with its presence. The whispering grew louder, more frantic, as if someone, was reaching out, trying to make contact. Her pulse quickened. She was no longer alone in the room. It felt as though the very house was alive, the walls pressing in on her. The locket was heavy in her hand, its weight unbearable now. She could feel its pulse in her palm, like it was breathing, alive with something far darker than she had anticipated. Lisa's vision blurred as the room seemed to spin. The air smelled faintly of roses, sweet and cloying, but beneath it, there was something else. Something rotten, like decay. She stumbled backward, her legs weak, until she collided with the back of the couch. Her breath came in shallow gasps, her heart pounding. The voice came again, louder now, a low, mournful cry. "You must release me. The chains bind me no longer, but I cannot rest. You must release me, or we will both be trapped forever." Lisa dropped the locket. It tumbled onto the floor with a dull thud, and suddenly, the room seemed to shift. The walls pulsed, the shadows lengthened, and the floorboards groaned beneath her feet. It was as if the very house was alive, its heart beating in rhythm with the pulse of the locket. The temperature plummeted, and Lisa's breath came out in visible puffs. She was in a place now that didn't belong to the living. She could feel the otherworldly presence, the darkness that hung in the air like a thick fog. A shadow moved in the corner of the room, long and stretching, until it took shape. A woman stood there, her features twisted and pale, her eyes hollow and dark, as though they had seen too much. She reached out, her hands slowly extending toward Lisa. "I never wanted this," the woman whispered, her voice raspy, hollow. "But now, you are the only one who can help me. You are the one who has answered the call." Lisa backed away, her breath ragged in her chest. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. The woman stepped closer, the shadows in the room swirling around her, consuming the space. "You must choose, Lisa," the woman said, her lips curling into a grin that was anything but reassuring. "Release me, and I will return what was taken. But if you do not, if you refuse, we will both suffer the same fate. Trapped in the shadows forever." Lisa's mind raced. The locket, the gift, it was never meant to bring love. It was never meant to be a simple trinket. It had been a trap, a curse that had bound the woman's soul to the object for eternity, a love so strong that it had held her in the dark for decades. And now, Lisa was caught in the middle. She had to make a choice. Before she could decide, the house around her shook, and the whispers grew louder. The woman's form flickered in and out of existence, like a ghost caught between worlds, desperately reaching out. Lisa's vision blurred, and then the lights flickered, plunging the room into darkness. The room was silent. And then, nothing.